Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? I hope so. Okay, I hope you can hear me. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to the second part of today's program. My name is Anna. I'm representing the Confederation of European Probation, and I will take over the moderation role until the end of today. I hope that everybody is back online and connected so we can start. Okay, excellent. The second part of today's agenda looks very interesting. We will have three presentations. Two presentations on the topic small-scale local facilities, which will talk about this experience in two different countries, the Netherlands and Belgium. And after this, we'll have a presentation on the probation officers as victim offender mediators in the Greek juvenile justice system. We will have 20 minutes for each of the three presentations. And after each presentation, we'll have 10 minutes for questions and answers. Please feel free to ask questions through the chat or Q&A function. Your questions will be more than welcome. So let's start with the small-scaled local facilities, the Dutch experience. We'll have three presenters. We'll have on the one hand, Jiske Wallace-Lems. She has worked for the Ministry of Justice and as Youth Probation Officer in the Netherlands and UK, and now is Project Manager for the Dutch Prison Service. We will also have Irene Bos, had worked for one of the Dutch youth detention centers, and now is responsible for developing one of the small-scale facilities in the south of the Netherlands. And we will also have Fleur. She's a psychologist conducting a PhD into relational security and also researcher in the criminal justice field in the evaluation of youth justice reforms in the Netherlands. I can see in the screen that someone is still sharing the screen. Okay, Fleur is already sharing the screen. So ladies, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sharing my, can people hear me? I'm sharing my video.
Yes.
Okay, you can't see me, but I'm fine with that.
Jiske, sorry to interrupt you, but we can see you in very small on the top of the screen, so that's perfectly fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Fleur, if you can go to the next slide. So Anna already said this, so we can skip this. My name is Jiske Wallace-Lems. I will be starting this presentation. I will be talking for a short amount of time, and then we will switch to Irene and Fleur, who will tell you a bit more about the research and the actual practice of the small-scale facilities. This is an overview of the Dutch system. As Helma just already told you, we're designing a new system where young people will be placed either in a low security facility or a high security facility, which we'll be calling local small-scale facilities for juvenile justice or forensic care centers. The small-scale facilities is what this particular presentation is about. The small-scale facilities for young people are designed for young people who can cope with a lower level of security. It's suitable for either young people on pre-trial remand or in the last phase of their sentence. And also what we hope to be looking into is combining criminal small-scale facilities with civil small-scale facilities. So young people who are placed in a secure facility for their own protection, to place them in the same facility as young people who were there on a criminal charge, although we realize it is a bridge too far to put them in the same group. But we do acknowledge that there might be similar problems with these young people. So we would be looking to place them in the same facility on separate groups, but so they could benefit from the same care and interventions. If you can go to the next slide. What is a small-scale facility? It's a facility where young people stay close to their own living environment with a lower security level, which means there's no high double walls, there's no barbed wire, it's not on a big estate or anything. It's in the middle of a residential area, and it's a house that houses about 8 young people. The aim is that their care and education or employment are continued, so they're allowed to go out during the day. They are locked in their room from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., but in between those times, so before or after those times, they are allowed to go to their own education, employment, meet with their parents or positive friends, and all this is laid down in a plan, which is supervised by the small-scale facility and the probation service. Positive elements in the network of the young person can be retained, and work, education, treatment, etc. can continue. It offers tailored relational and physical security, supervision and guidance with a positive learning and residential climate. Fleur will tell you a lot more in a minute about what we consider to be relational security and how that works. Another very important aspect is that the young people in our network are in charge of their own care plan. So they get to decide what their next move is going to be, what education they're going to approach, and what basically needs to be done to get their life back on track. And it's a huge collaboration with all sorts of different organizations. So education, probation, prosecution service, the municipality, etc. They're all very much involved in developing a suitable and workable plan for the young person. Next slide, please. Now I want to show you some pictures of our small-scale facility in Amsterdam. As you can see, it's a normal house. That car park in front is not part of some kind of estate, as I said. That's just a road that other houses are on that normal people live in. So it's in Amsterdam West. As you can see, the rooms are simple. They do have thick doors that lock at night, but they have an intercom which they can call help or if they need anything. And as you can see, the young people can cook themselves. They have to do their own dishes, and they also do their own, mostly do their own groceries. I think that's last. Oh, this is just a timescale of the implementation. So we're going to have 5 small-scale facilities, but Helma already went through this, which one is going to be where. There's 3 more to open, and they will all be in 2021. That was me, I think. Yeah, I'll hand over to Irene. She works in the small-scale facility, just tell you a little bit more about how it works in practice.
Yes, thank you, Jiske. I'm Irene Bos, and I work at a small care facility in the south. In an early presentation, there was a question where it is. It is nearby Maastricht. And we are likely to move to a higher part of the Netherlands, so we can take care of more group or of young people. Can I have the next slide? In our small care facility, we have a boy. His name is Koen. And without a small care facility, he would be in a prison, in a youth care prison, but now he's staying at the small care facility, and there are a lot of difference between the young prison, the youth prison, or the small care facility. At this point, Koen is I'm sorry. At this point, Koen, if he would be in a youth prison, he would stay in a group of 10 young other people with a lot of criminal problems, and he would learn from them, and he had to share all the rooms and the attention from the caretakers. Koen, he got in a very life-threatening fight with another boy, and he has a lot of physical aggression that he shows to other youth, and the school can't handle him anymore. The extra rules that he has given as a chance didn't work enough, so they were thinking, what is the best place for Koen? Can I have the next slide? Koen has got the chance to stay at a small care facility with us in the south. And at this moment, we see that with all the attention he gets, and he can still go to his school, and with the guidance of us to the school and to Koen, he did get another chance to stay at his school. We built up his hours of school from 2 hours, and when it went well, then we built on the hours of school. So at this moment, he goes in his own way with his bike and with the bus to his school, and he can attend to school for whole days. If he was in the youth prison, it would be further away from his home and from his original school, and then he has to change from school. Now he can go to his own school, and when he's ready and he can go home again, then he will can go to his school, and he didn't miss any of the school. That's not only with school, it's also with treatment. Koen did get treatment in his environment, in his own environment. Treatment goes on while staying in our facility. Also, the parents and the friends with a positive influence on him, and his brother and the probation officer can come to the facility, and Koen can also go outside with or with guidance with a caretaker, or on his own. He can go to a sport outside of the facility. And that's different when it is in the prison. Then you have to build on, along with the treatment, the time that you can go out, and the visitors that you can get in the facility. Now, Koen can have, with his parents and the probation officers, his own plan, what he needs to go home again, and not come into the same problems as before. We see that all the attention, the relational safety we can offer him, makes that he can develop well again. In this facility, we work together with the community, with the school, with treatment facilities, with all the people around Koen, but also with all the people around the facility, so that he can he get the best chance of bettering his life and deal with his problems and his challenges and his goals. Can I have the next slide? This is a list of the differences when he would be in a great youth prison, or when he is staying at a small care facility, in which he is now. We can see that now his treatment can go on. He doesn't have to start another treatment. He doesn't have to start a change in school, and he can practice with his parents. He now is going to start a multi-system therapy, so he can practice for when he is done at the small care facility. And then the treatment and the change will also be not only be with Koen, but also with his own environment, and also with his brother and his parents. So it works better than when you only treat in the great facility further away from his own home. Can I have the next slide? At this point, Koen is doing well. He's making the plan to go back to home with his treatment, with the multi-system therapy. The school is going well, he's doing well, and we can see with our observation on which items his goals are, and in which items his coping is well, and in which items he has to learn and has to grow. So we can use our experiences and his experiences to complete his plan, and this way you can work very preventive. You prevent him from going to the prison, and you can prevent that it's going very bad with him. So now he has a chance to build on a better life and not and to stop with his criminal further career. Okay, next slide. Okay, it's a good chance for Koen. He's growing. The relational safety works well from him. And now I'm going to give the word to Fleur.
Well, thank you, Irene and Jiske. And also this morning, I think we heard a bit about from Helma and Sanne about all the developments here in the Netherlands. And I'm going to share with you a bit from the research side, because as was said in the introduction, I'm involved with the Academische Werkplaats, which is an academic workspace where policymakers, scientists, practitioners all work together to develop knowledge and support reforms. And what we did with the pilots of the small-scale facilities, because there were 5 actually in the Netherlands, is that we researched them through all the phases. So we focused on the screening, the time in the local facility, and a follow-up. And we did that with quantitative methods, mainly focusing on protective factors, but also a lot of focus was on qualitative methods, doing interviews, doing observations. And we try to bring the perspective of staff, young people, stakeholders together to really get an idea of actually what it means when you want to implement these facilities and how it relates to everyone's responsibilities and roles. And I'm mainly going to focus now because there's a lot to say about these developments and all the results we got from 4 years of monitoring, but I'm going to focus mainly on what we found with regards to relational security and the protective factors. So when you look at security, there's actually 3 elements. So there's physical security, mainly the locks and walls you build, procedural security, so the rules around regulating visits, the items young people can have in their room, and there's relational security. And I think relational security, or sometimes it's referred to as dynamic security, is something that is heard more often, but we didn't really have a clear idea of what it actually is and how you can use it to establish security and safety. So what we found is from doing interviews with young people, staff, and actually their parents as well, trying to bring their perspective together and what they actually consider to be secure environment and above all a safe environment, we found 3 elements. So youth staff interactions that is formed on a couple of basic elements, collaboration and staff presence, and I will elaborate on each of these elements now. And a young person actually told us in an interview, feeling safe is not about the structures of a building. Feeling safe is about the people around me. And what we saw is in the small-scale facilities, as was mentioned before already, is that indeed the elements of especially physical security are quite low. As you saw in the picture, there's no wall, the doors, they're not, the windows, they're not fenced, but relational security is actually high. And I think that's also something interesting to explore in the future, how these elements of security relate to each other, and if you can really complement implementing relational security elements and then lowering your physical security. So the 3 elements of relational security, staff and youth interaction, is mainly formed through connecting and aligning with young people, their world and their logic. So as was mentioned already before, it's really focusing on, so what do young people actually aspire, but also how do they look at the world, and can we try to understand their logic and also approach them from that perspective. And then there is another 5. So this is the main element of how staff within the small-scale facility connect with young people. And then we found that there's other elements, loving care, so really providing attention and also seeing them as more than just a offender. empowerment, so focusing on how we can strengthen them. And also an important thing was formulate positive steps. So instead of focusing on what you can't do, really trying to focus on what do you actually want to work towards. A genuine connection, especially young people, for them this was one of the most important things, is just approach us as you are, as your person, not just from your role as a staff member, but really trying to be genuine, just be normal, just have an interaction from human to human. But of course, this is also a complex way. But so for staff, it was important to find, so what do I actually feel comfortable sharing? And how can I use that actually to connect with young people? And staff is a role model. So you said we pick up everything. So this really relates to doing what you say and also providing a good example throughout the whole day you're working, and respectful mutual boundaries. And this is not necessarily boundaries formulated by rules or protocols, but if you put relational security more in the center of your security framework, it's really focusing on the interaction between two individuals. So the individual boundaries based on your values become more prominent in how a facility operates. And what we saw is that there were indeed also differences between staff members. And we saw that if staff members really just explain and really are clear on the fact that there are differences, but that they're based on certain values of their own, it wasn't necessarily a problem. So I think that's also something very interesting to look at. So how much do you want to standardize in rules and regulations, and how much space do you leave for a genuine connection and interaction between two individuals, and how does that play to the safety in a facility? Then the second element of relational security is collaboration. And it actually means collaborating with young people to build on protective factors. So actually connecting with them and seeing them as a co-creator of a safe environment through building on what actually motivates them. So looking at the risks, but also looking at how can we strengthen protective factors to actually buffer against the risk factors. And in practice, that means that youth have ownership over their trajectory. So they're having a seat at the table, and stakeholders meet to set out the trajectory. In one of the pilot facilities, youth presented towards all the stakeholders, really putting their perspective on what they think, how the plan should be constructed. The autonomy and responsibility is really stimulated. They're allowed to learn by trial and error. So there's actually some room for them to practice out in the world. In the Netherlands, we say you can't swim on the shore, you need to be in the water. And I think that's very characteristics of relational security. It's not closing everything off with regulations and leaving actually space for them to learn, and also not allowing errors to be there, and considering the path towards desistance as not, it's really a long road. And staff as a coach. So really not doing it from an authoritative position, but standing beside young people and acting as their coach, but also providing a clear structure and boundaries. And these are the boundaries more related to, of course, there is room, but there are also rules and there is boundaries. And it's also not, if you operate on relational security, that everyone can just go and stand wherever they want, but there are really, really clear agreements that we all agree on with each other. And then the third element, it might be a very open doors, we would say, but it's actually staff presence. So staff just being there. And I think it's important that they are present from this collaborative approach and in interaction, but just being there, well, it prevents things from happening. It allows staff to really observe, intervene, and de-escalate if needed. They're available for support. So young people really told us that they connect most with staff members that are actually there. And even staff not only offering active support, but if they need it and they are there and they're just sitting there, they can really approach them. And I think for them, it's an important element. So things don't escalate, emotions don't I would say escalate. And it allows room for informal activities. And informal activities really are a means of also providing a positive atmosphere with each other. So these are the three elements of relational security, and it's still a concept that is going under development. And what we saw is relational security was established in a way that allowed for the experienced safety of young people and staff to be high. We saw that there's indication of less deviancy training because it's so focused on youth's trajectory and they are constantly reminded of the way forward. We saw that they were less focused on the group dynamics. Motivation of young people was high. There was a positive working climate and job satisfaction, and wide support from staff, young people, and caregivers. And most importantly, relational security really allowed for protective factors to be continued and initiated. We saw that in almost all trajectories in the local facilities that school or work was continued or initiated. Previous structures of support and care were continued or initiated. And parents, through the structure of the small-scale facility in a local place and relational security, allowed for accessible and frequent contact between young people and the parents. And they were really, parents and caregivers were put in an active caregiver role. And they said that it allowed for a smoother transition back home. And what we did as follow-up, we looked at, so how are young people actually doing on these protective factors? And we saw that about 72% still had a structural daytime activity 10 months after their release. 64% still lived at home. They rated their involvement of their support network as good, and 50% was satisfied, and 15% was in a closed institution at the time of follow-up. And I think this shows that if you invest in actually continuing initiating these protective factors, it lasts also after release. So I can imagine that after hearing this, it sounds as pretty much a success story. And I think the pilots, indeed, as Helma also pointed out, it was in a sense because the minister actually decided to implement this nationwide, but I do want to bring some nuances. So it's not a solution for every problem, and it's also not a quick fix. So the young people placed in a local facility are selected there. So it's still a question of how can we also offer a tailored approach to other populations. It's a very complex population in a complex context. So what can we conclude is that we saw in these facilities that you are able to establish a secure, safe, and both therapeutic environment. Not all youth that are now before were placed in more high secure facilities need those high security measures. Key elements like relational security may be applied in other settings. And there was a wide support from government professionals, youth, and parents. And I think my last slide is, so I think a question was also, so how did the pilots, how did we actually, it's very good that the pilots managed to continue and last. And we identified throughout our evaluation a couple of factors that contributed towards that and might be recommendations if other countries would consider policy transfer. We want to highlight a few elements that were important in why these pilots actually managed. I'm sorry, I'm actually in a closed facility, so if you hear a beep, that's the beeper. So at first, it was a phased and very timely trajectory. So in 2015, they already started with laying the framework in collaboration with all stakeholders, so local stakeholders and national stakeholders. The community was actually involved. And there was a project manager. I think Irene she's the one for the one itself, but it's a very, very important element. So there's one who's creating support for these reforms. learning by trial and error. So like the young people, also the people on the ground were allowed, giving the space to learn by trial and error. Trust was placed in those directly working with young people, so very closely on the floor, looking at their experience and knowledge. And selection, training, supervision, and management, and monitoring and evaluation. So I think this is, yeah, we will now start with the questions.
Well, ladies, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. Thank you very much for sharing with us your experience on this quite new and quite unique approach. If I may say so, a tailor-made approach. I actually really appreciated that you used a casework to show how you would work with this juvenile, with Koen. This was very illustrative. And I also find it very important that you mentioned the protective factors and not only the risk factors. Sometimes when we work with juveniles or young adults, we tend to focus on risk factors. But as you show, working on protective factors is much more positive and also with better results. Now it's time for questions and answers. Before I see some questions coming in to questions, but first I like to make two questions. The first question is that you talked about relational security, and I would like to ask you, is this concept, relational security, related to what the literature and also practitioners call the working alliance? This balance between care and control. And the second question I like to ask is that you did not mention any aspect about gender. Do you have girls in those facilities? And if yes, do you have specific intervention programs or activities for them? Thank you.
I can answer the question. The small care facility can also be for girls, but it's very new in the Netherlands. So we didn't have a girl already, but we can mix the boys and the girls together. And another about the relational safety. It's alike what you said before. It's about the real contact and the balance between the relation and the safety, the control, the boundaries.
And maybe
I also saw the question about why the doors are closed at night.
Yes, sorry, Irene. Sorry, Irene. I don't know if Fleur wanted to add something else to the previous question.
Yeah, maybe just a small, I think indeed it's very good. Like the concept of relational security, the elements that it contains are not new. They are wide known in indeed the literature on alliance and also on the living climate. I think what might be sort of new to it is that we try to look at, so can you actually use it to establish a secure and safe environment, which then relates to an open living climate, and using that working alliance to actually establish security and incorporate it within your security framework, maybe replacing more physical security measures. But yeah, they're well-known concepts.
Excellent, thank you. So let's see the questions that are coming in. Okay, yes, yes. Many questions came in. The one for closing the doors during the night. I was wondering, what is the reason they close the doors at night? If youngsters would want to leave, they could do that easily during the day. Are there other security reasons?
It's a sort of compensation for detention, and the youth are using it to think about what happened in their life and what they have done and how they want to grow with it, and they have time to think about it and to talk about it in the day with the caretakers. So it's a compensation for the detention measurement.
Okay. Other questions coming in on the smaller scale facilities. How long is the average stay of a youth in these facilities?
We try to make it about 3 months, but when longer is needed, then we make it longer, and when it's shorter, it's also okay. It's what's the best for the youth.
The basic idea is that it's for short stay. So it's a short, sharp shock intervention, basically. And I think the average stay, but Fleur can say this more accurately, during the trial period, I think was about 5 weeks. And there's a maximum of 3 months for young people at the end of their sentence. But if their pretrial custody lasts longer than 3 months, then obviously we're not going to kick them out. But
Yeah,
the idea
absolutely.
is it's a short intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. There is another question, and they ask us clarification regarding the age. They said, you have already said that perhaps during your presentation, but which age juveniles are placed in these facilities?
They can be from 12 and up to when youth justice is applied, which in the Netherlands can be up to 23 at the time of offending. When they leave, it can be up to 24, 25. As long as they're subject to youth justice, they can be placed in a small scale facility.
Wow, I can see that your presentation raised many questions, more questions. We will just have 2 more questions, and then we will continue with the program, if it's that fine for you. So can you tell us more about the professional profile of the staff that is working in these smaller scale facilities? Are they social workers, psychologists, or a mixture of it?
There are social workers, there's a psychologist, and there are, how do you say it, Jiske?
Yesterday I called them hosts. So they're people with a security background, but a security and pedagogical background, kind of a combination of the two. And they're kind of the host who lets the young people in. There can be searches, there can be urine checks as well. But they definitely also have that secure, like relational security element. So it's a combination of backgrounds.
Okay, excellent. And do they follow a special course to start working in these facilities apart from the security element that they have all the same? Do they have to follow a special, when they start in this facility, a special training course or something like that?
They are being coached by the psychologist and give relational safety and work on the relation with the youth.
Okay, Fleur, you want to mention something else? No?
Okay.
Okay, so and now the last question, who is running these smaller scale units, the state or local government? Are these units parts of the state correctional system?
Yes, they are very much part of the state correctional system. They are being run by local providers, but so the state's paying for them, the state's implementing the policies and the legislation, but they're private companies, so to speak, who run the facilities for the Dutch government.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's now time to continue with the